I waited years before I was ready to tell this story. Some memories can't be put into words right away. Because before you try to explain what happened, you first try to put yourself back together. I am 34 years old now. This is the age where I can look back and finally see some things clearly for the first time. Back then, I was 26. And those years looked like the most stable years of my life. At that time, I was married. From the outside, everything seemed to be in place. We had a home we built together and a familiar routine. When people met us, they usually said the same thing: "You two seem so compatible." Some even saw us as an example of a good couple. Every time I heard that, I smiled. Because in those moments, I really wanted to believe it was true. The place we lived was quiet. The streets looked alike, the houses were built with the same lines. In the evenings, the lights turned on at almost the same time. People there liked their lives without surprises. They liked everything to be predictable. For a long time, I thought that was a safe thing. A stable life, a stable marriage, a stable future. But over time, I realized something: some lives are not questioned because they look too orderly. And the things that are not questioned are the ones that fall apart in the quietest way. Back then, I didn't know this. I wasn't aware of anything yet. Or maybe I was, but I didn't have the courage to name it. The only thing I knew was that inside a life where everything was normal, I was slowly starting to feel invisible. And that feeling was the first step of everything I am about to tell. When I married my husband, I felt safe. He was a calm man. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't like arguments. People saw this as maturity. I did too. Now when I look back, I know that silence does not always mean peace. In the first years of our marriage, everything was how it should be. We went to work. In the evenings, we cooked together. On weekends, we went to the grocery store, bought unnecessary things, then came home and never really used them. Our life was not made of big moments, but of small days that repeated themselves. But one day, I noticed something very small. So small that I didn't even stop to think about it at the time. He started leaving his phone face down. When I noticed it, I told myself, everyone does that. Someone else might have felt suspicious. I didn't. Because back then, cheating meant texting other women, secret meetings, denying everything when caught. It never crossed my mind that it could come with silence, routine, and calm. One evening, while we were sitting in the living room, a notification appeared on his phone. The screen lit up. Just for a second. I saw a name. A name I didn't recognize. But I didn't push it. I didn't ask, "Who was that?" Because in our marriage, there were things we didn't ask. And for a long time, I saw that silence as trust. Not asking questions doesn't mean there is no problem. But I didn't know that then. I thought silence meant maturity. I believed that not having to talk about everything meant a strong bond. Months passed. There was no big change in his behavior. He didn't come home late. He wasn't constantly on his phone. There were no moments where I clearly felt he was lying. From the outside, everything still looked normal. But slowly, I started to feel less visible. As if there was only one person in the house, and I was just there. Looking back now as I tell this story, I realize something. Sometimes your place in someone's life doesn't change because of what they do, but because of how they look at you. And that was what bothered me the most. He used to look at my face when I talked. He made eye contact. I felt listened to. Then he stopped looking. He wasn't looking at me anymore, he was looking at the time. Not at what I was saying, but at what he would do next. And at first, I couldn't put a name to it. If any of this sounds familiar to you, I want you to know this. You are not the only one who has felt this way. Sometimes when you listen to a story, you find a piece of yourself in it. That's why I'm here. If these kinds of real-life stories speak to you, you can support me by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. If you write in the comments where you're watching or listening from, I would truly like to see you there. Maybe you found a part of yourself in these lines too. I will keep telling this story. Because some stories become lighter when they are shared. One night, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, he walked past me quietly. He used to touch my shoulder when he passed. That night, he didn't. In that moment, this sentence crossed my mind. Something is changing, but it doesn't have a name yet. There is no shouting in this story. No broken objects. No sudden confrontations. This story begins in a marriage where it looks like nothing is happening, while the truth slowly starts to seep through the walls. And I didn't know yet that I would end up watching that truth with my own eyes. Everything looked the same from the outside. The days followed each other, our routine stayed intact. Mornings started at the same hour, evenings ended on the same couch. But I could no longer feel certain moments the way I used to. The scenes were the same, but their meanings were slowly changing. Suspicion doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't sound like an alarm. It doesn't slam doors or turn on lights. It's more like the discomfort caused by a lamp that has been left on for too long. At first, you don't understand why it bothers you. Then one day, you realize the light has always been there. You were just trying to get used to it. My husband had started taking showers more often. By itself, that didn't mean anything. Sometimes people are tired. Sometimes they just want to relax. But the fact that he started taking his phone into the bathroom made it feel less ordinary. Before, he used to leave his phone on the coffee table. Now, wherever he went, it went with him. The kitchen. The bathroom. The garage. Even when he left his phone on the table, he placed it face down. It seemed like a small detail. But that detail left me with a feeling of discomfort I couldn't explain. One evening, we came back from the grocery store. I carried the bags into the kitchen while he stayed in the car. "I've got a call," he said. His voice wasn't rushed. It was calm. But when I walked toward the car, I didn't hear him talking. When I looked through the window, he was just sitting behind the wheel, staring at the screen. At that moment, I felt a slight tension inside me. It was very small. Like a muscle tightening suddenly. But I felt it. And as always, I stayed quiet. Because I didn't want to be someone who caused problems. I didn't want to be the woman who constantly questioned her relationship. I didn't want to be someone who made up scenarios in her head. So instead, I questioned myself. Was I tired? Was I more sensitive? Had my life become too stagnant? Maybe the problem was me. Because accepting that was easier than thinking about another possibility. What stopped me the most was that he was still kind to me. He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't accusing. Some days, he even came home with flowers. Small gestures. But there was something in that kindness I couldn't name. Like a duty. Like a habit. Like a role. That kindness felt less like closeness coming from the heart and more like a routine that had to be maintained. One night, I couldn't sleep. I looked at his face while he slept quietly next to me. His features were familiar, but the feeling inside me was not. I thought about the years we had spent together. I wondered when I had disappeared inside those years. And for the first time, I asked myself this question. Can someone leave a marriage without doing anything at all? I didn't know the answer. But a voice inside me whispered that the answer was yes. The next week, while folding laundry, I found a small receipt in the pocket of his pants. It was from a cafe on the other side of the city. That day, he had told me he would be late from work. When I held the receipt in my hand, my heart didn't race. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stopped. Because in that moment, I understood that small pieces I could no longer deny were starting to come together. Pieces that meant nothing on their own, but spoke quietly when placed side by side. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I wasn't ready yet. I didn't want to hear the truth. I wanted to see it. And that thought, without me realizing it, put me on a path. A path with no return. That night, for the first time, I secretly searched online. Home security cameras. Easy setup. Remote viewing. I stared at the screen. I closed the browser. Then I opened it again. I hadn't made a decision yet. But my mind had accepted that I no longer knew the man I was living with. And that acceptance was as calming as it was frightening. Because I was no longer the one waiting. I was the one thinking. The moment I decided wasn't dramatic. It wasn't raining. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. It was a Sunday morning. He had left the house. "I'm going to take a walk," he said. He had been using that sentence a lot lately. While I was drinking coffee alone in the kitchen, I opened my laptop. This time, I didn't close the browser. I really looked at the security cameras. Small, unnoticeable, silent models. The kind sold for pets. The kind made for children's rooms. They were all in the innocent category. In that moment, I made a rule for myself. That rule became the only thing that kept me standing. I would look for the truth. Not revenge. Because I knew where a path that starts with revenge can lead. I just wanted to be sure. I wanted to know that I wasn't lying to myself. I ordered 2 cameras. One for the living room. One for the corner facing the garage door. I didn't put one in the bedroom. I didn't put one in the bathroom. That was my second rule. I didn't want to lose my self-respect yet. When the cameras arrived, I was alone at home. I didn't feel guilty while opening the boxes. Because this didn't feel like a secret game. It felt more like a reflex to protect my own life. The setup was easier than I expected. I downloaded an app to my phone. I set a password. I turned off notifications. I didn't want notifications. Because if something was happening, I wanted to see it when I was ready. For the first few days, I didn't watch anything. I forgot the cameras were there. The house was still the same house. My husband was still the same husband. But I was standing in a different place now. More careful. More quiet. One evening when he came home, he left his shoes in a different place than usual. I wouldn't have noticed that before. But now, I did. That night, after he fell asleep, I didn't pick up my phone. I didn't check the cameras. Because there was a strange fear inside me. I knew that if I saw the truth, I wouldn't be able to go back. On the 3rd day, during my lunch break at work, I opened the app. The living room was empty. The garage was quiet. I felt relieved. Maybe I was exaggerating everything. But just as I was about to close it, I noticed the past recording section. The timeline. Small blue lines. One of them caught my attention. From a time when I wasn't home. My finger stayed on the screen for a moment. Then I tapped it. What I saw was not the betrayal itself. But it taught me this. Something really was happening. My husband walked into the living room. He was talking on the phone. I couldn't hear his voice clearly, but his face. His face was different. He was smiling. In a way I hadn't seen in years. I felt a hollow space open in my stomach. But I didn't cry. I just paused the video. Put the phone on the table. Took a deep breath. I knew it now. This path was going to take me to the end. And for the first time, I didn't want to run away. After watching that video, my life split into two parts. Before the cameras, and after the cameras. From that point on, every time I left the house and closed the door, a strange calm settled inside me. Because I knew the truth was recorded somewhere. That thought hurt, but it was clear. For a while, I decided not to watch anymore. I wanted to give myself time. But curiosity is not patient. A week later, after work, I was sitting in my car and opened the app again. This time, I didn't watch live. I went to the recorded footage. The same time frames. The hours when I wasn't home. At first, there were only conversations. Phone calls. But now the sounds were clearer. His voice was soft. A tone he never used with me. His sentences were short, but intimate. Yes. I was thinking about you too. Today was harder. I wish you were here. Hearing those words was harder than seeing anything. Because images can lie to you. But voices rarely do. In one recording, he sat down on the couch. He pulled the phone away from his ear. Looked at the screen. And smiled. That smile. That was what destroyed me the most. Because that smile didn't belong to me. It was a look he hadn't given me in years. At that moment, there was no doubt left. But something was still missing. Proof. Sometimes, even the most painful truth needs more evidence to be accepted. Then one day, something happened that I didn't expect. The garage camera detected movement. I was at work. It was around 3 in the afternoon. Normally, the house would be empty at that hour. I opened the recording. The door opened. A woman walked in. I didn't see her face clearly. But her hair, her walk, her posture. She didn't feel unfamiliar. My husband closed the door. He turned the key from the inside. I didn't drop my phone. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Because something strange happened. My heart didn't break. I realized it had already been broken for a while. I switched to the living room camera. They didn't step fully into the frame. But I could hear them. Laughter. Whispers. A familiar kind of comfort. At one point, the woman said, "Are we safe here?" My husband answered, "Yes, don't worry." That sentence made something inside me completely snap. Because for years, I had been trying to feel safe in that house. I closed the video. I wondered if I should delete the recording. I didn't. Because it was time to change my first rule. This was no longer just about knowing the truth. This was about dignity. And I had decided to stop being silent. After learning the truth, something inside a person changes. Emotions stop moving, and time takes over. That was exactly where I was. I wasn't crying. I wasn't panicking. I didn't feel the need to tell anyone. Instead, there was a very clear silence inside me. And in that silence, I realized something for the first time. I was no longer the one reacting. I was the one in control. My husband suspected nothing. Because I didn't change anything. I came home at the same time. I cooked the same meals. I asked the same questions, like, "How was your day?" Most people begin betrayal with confrontation. I chose to act instead. But this role was not about making myself smaller. It was about taking full control. What I saw on the cameras no longer shocked me. Because I already knew what I would see. The woman coming and going. How comfortable she was in the house. Everything was regular. The betrayal wasn't chaotic. It was planned. And that planning became important information for me. Because unplanned people make mistakes. Planned people relax. And relaxed people leave traces. During this time, I repositioned myself. I talked less. I asked fewer questions. I listened more. I noticed the gaps in his stories, but I didn't fill them. Because those gaps were useful to me now. At some point, I realized something else. He wasn't making space for me anymore. I was making space for his lies. The hardest part was controlling my impatience. I wanted to end everything immediately. Expose the truth. Leave the house. Close the door. But then I asked myself, on whose terms will this story end? The answer was clear. Mine. One evening, as if it were completely casual, I told him I might need to leave town. A work excuse. I didn't go into details. He didn't ask. That didn't surprise me, but I noted it. Because it showed how ready he was for my absence. That night, when I was alone, I stood in front of the mirror. There was no anger on my face. No sense of being a victim. Only clarity. I said to myself, this marriage was not built on my silence, and it will not end with my silence either. In that moment, I understood something important. Revenge is not always about shouting. Sometimes, it is patience. My plan was starting to take shape, but I still wasn't in a hurry. Because he needed to relax. He needed to make more mistakes. He needed to feel safe. And I gave him exactly that. I gave him space. I gave him peace. I gave him a normal marriage. And he believed that peace was real. On the day he thought I had left town, I was actually still in the same city. I stayed in a small hotel that no one really noticed. I chose it on purpose. I didn't want anything fancy. I knew this wasn't an escape for me. It was observation. That evening, I didn't even unpack my suitcase. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed my phone on the table. The cameras were on. The lights in my house were looking back at me through the screen. Nothing happened in the first few hours. That didn't surprise me. People don't break their habits right away. But later that night, the way my husband came home was different. He closed the door harder than usual. He took a few steps without taking off his shoes. Small details like that showed me something important. He was no longer playing a role. The house had become his space. A space without responsibility. After a while, the garage camera detected movement. It wasn't his car. My heart didn't race, but I held my breath. The woman was there again. This time, she wasn't hesitant. She didn't look around. She didn't pause at the door. It was as if she had been there many times before. And in that moment, I thought this. If a home feels this familiar to someone else, the marriage has already been lonely for a long time. The living room camera picked up clear sounds. Laughter. Comfortable conversations. And moments of silence in between. Those silences affected me the most. Because silence is not a sign of shame. It is a sign of getting used to something. The woman went into the kitchen. She opened the cabinets. She took a glass. She knew which glass was thinner. She didn't choose the one I liked. She chose the one that fit her hand better. That detail broke the last emotional tie inside me. They stayed together that night. But it wasn't romantic. There was no rush. No hiding. They looked like two people who had been living in the same house for a long time. In the morning, they made coffee. My husband stood by the window and looked outside. The woman said something to him. Her voice wasn't clear, but his answer was. We don't need to be careful anymore. That sentence became the center of everything for me. Because he believed there was nothing left to be careful about. My absence felt like freedom to him. That feeling of freedom gave me time. Because when people feel safe, they don't avoid mistakes. They leave traces. That morning, I didn't delete any recordings. On the contrary, I organized them. Hour by hour. Day by day. Not just the images, but the behaviors became clear. His lies were no longer separate pieces. They were a complete picture. And instead of breaking that picture, I kept it. Because a confrontation done when everything is perfectly in place is the most powerful one. I didn't go home that day. I waited until evening. I returned to the hotel. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. I wasn't tired. I wasn't broken. I was determined. For the first time, I felt this clearly. At the end of this story, no one would feel sorry for me. Because I would not allow it. When I finally went home, my husband was the same as always. Polite. Calm. Problem-free. I was the same too. Because now we were both playing the same game. But there was one difference. I was the only one who knew the rules. After I came back home, I didn't do anything for a few days. That was part of the plan. People usually feel that something is changing before a big move. I didn't want him to feel that. I woke up at the same hours. I went to work at the same time. I spoke the same way as always. But inside me, I knew I was no longer alone. The truth was quietly there with me. One evening, while clearing the table after dinner, I said something as if it came out without thinking. "We haven't brought people together in a long time," I said. "I feel like everyone is so scattered." I didn't look at his face when I said it. Because eye contact sometimes carries too much meaning. He didn't hear it as a need, only as a detail. He nodded. "If you want, we can do that," he said. The fact that he agreed so easily showed me I was on the right path. In the following days, I handled the organization myself. I chose who to invite very carefully. Not everyone from his family. Only the ones who were close but didn't ask questions. From my side, I invited people who saw me as strong. But who didn't dig too deeply into my private life. This was not going to be a confrontation night. This was an environment prepared for the truth to reveal itself on its own. I chose my mother's house as the location. That was also intentional. If it were our own home, he might still feel like the space was under his control. My mother's house was where I grew up. A place he never truly belonged to. We set the date. A simple dinner. An evening that didn't look special. So no one would be on alert. During the preparation, I watched the camera footage again. But this time, not with emotion. With structure. Who came, when they came, how long they stayed. Which sentences were repeated. What we call betrayal was actually a behavior pattern that repeated itself. And those repetitions told the whole story without me needing to explain anything. At some point, I realized something important. I was no longer trying to prove what he did. I was watching how he had divided his life into two. One side was orderly, familiar, and safe. The other side was comfortable, careless, and temporary. People think they choose the second side. But most of the time, they lose both. A few days before the dinner, I reminded him again. I told him who would be there. There was no tension on his face. On the contrary, there was a little pride. From the outside, he was still playing the role of the good husband. He liked that role. Because no one expected more from him. During those days, I felt very clear inside. I knew what I would do. What I would say. And when I would stay silent. That gave me strength. Because strength is not shouting or crying. Strength is being able to wait for the right moment. The night before the dinner, I prepared a small envelope. I didn't put any evidence inside. Just one sentence. That sentence was the summary of everything. I put the envelope in my bag. Just knowing it was there was enough. That night, while lying in bed, I looked at the man next to me. I used to look at him and see the future. That night, I only saw an ending. And that ending didn't scare me. Because now this story was moving forward. Not because of his mistakes. But because of my patience. The dinner started calmer than I expected. My mother's house was the same as always, familiar smells, a little too much light, traces of many years on the walls. As people arrived, the space filled up, but there was no tension. Exactly how I wanted it. No one was expecting something special. That mattered to me. Because the moments when truth is heard most clearly are the ones no one prepares for. My husband looked relaxed. He talked easily. He laughed, passed plates, poured drinks. As I watched his comfort, I felt no rush inside. Because for me, this scene was not a beginning, it was a result. I wanted to see how a behavior I had been watching for a long time became normal in a crowd. And I saw it. No one suspected anything. Because everyone was looking at the version of him they already knew. As the meal went on, conversations split. Small groups formed. Some people moved to the kitchen, some to the living room. I stayed at the table. On purpose. That was still the center. After a while, my husband came back and sat next to me. He looked at me. His eyes had that familiar expression, everything is fine. In that moment, I knew this was exactly the scene I had prepared for myself. When dessert was served, I didn't stand up. I didn't ask for silence. I simply started speaking, without drawing attention, lightly touching the table. My voice was calm. Clear. Not dramatic, not demanding. It flowed like a sentence that had needed to be said for a long time, but had always been postponed. I've been noticing some things about myself lately, I said. And I wanted to say them out loud. Because silence can sometimes be misunderstood. No one objected. No one laughed. At first, my husband thought this was a personal reflection. He was relaxed. Then I continued. I didn't give names. I didn't mention dates. I didn't show evidence. I only described how one house can hold two separate lives. The same walls, the same furniture, different realities. While I spoke, I didn't look at anyone. Because eye contact can create defense. I didn't want defense. I wanted understanding. That's when the air at the table changed. A silence settled in, but not one of shame. It was the silence of realization. My husband turned toward me. For the first time that evening, the comfort on his face disappeared. But he was still looking for a way out. I didn't give him one. I took the envelope out of my bag. I didn't open it. I didn't hand it to anyone. I just placed it in the middle of the table. This is no longer something no one knows, I said. It just hasn't been said until now. Then I added, for me, this is enough. No one shouted. No one accused. There weren't even questions. Because everyone felt that something had shifted out of place. My husband wanted to speak, but I stopped him. Not now, I said. I don't owe anyone an explanation tonight. I was the first to stand up from the table. As I walked toward the door, the silence behind me felt lighter than the weight I had carried for years. Because that weight was no longer mine. For the first time, it was moving back to where it belonged. After that night, my life didn't change all at once, but its direction did. People expect everything to be resolved quickly after a confrontation. But some doors close quietly, and only later do you realize the cold air has stopped coming in. That's how it was for me. When we went back home, we didn't talk. This time, the silence didn't weigh on me. Before, it carried questions. That night, I already knew the answers. The dreams I had built in that house weren't destroyed, they were just built in the wrong place. The next day, I took time off and walked through unfamiliar streets. No one knew my story, and that felt freeing. For the first time, I didn't need to be understood. A week later, he wanted to talk. He spoke without fully taking responsibility. The familiar sentence, "I don't understand how we got here," didn't anger me. Some people don't want understanding, they want escape. I told him what I wanted. Clearly. Briefly. Without explanations. Long explanations give the other person the chance to convince you. I had taken that back. Meeting the lawyer surprised me. I spoke in facts, not emotions. Betrayal didn't happen suddenly, and seeing that clearly was painful, but relieving. There were no more what-ifs. While packing, I left behind more than objects. I left habits, weight, and things I never chose for myself. Sometimes leaving a relationship also means leaving what you no longer need. My new place was quiet, but I wasn't empty. That silence belonged to me. Over time, I noticed how often I had put myself last, and how much of myself I had slowly given away. Months later, I saw him one last time. There was regret in his eyes, but it wasn't for me. I felt no anger. And I understood, anger means connection. Mine was gone. Some people thought I took revenge. I didn't. I didn't expose or humiliate anyone. I simply stepped away. And for some people, losing access to you is the greatest consequence. My life isn't perfect now, but it's real. I know how I feel. I don't doubt myself or soften my voice to be accepted. That is enough. I'm sharing this story because I can. It doesn't define me, it shows where I passed through. And I passed through it. I chose myself. Quietly. With certainty. Without looking back. And it was the best decision I've ever made. This is not a story about winning. It's a story about realizing. You may not always notice betrayal, but you will always feel when you're drifting away from yourself. That feeling is the most honest sign. If you constantly feel like you have to explain yourself, if your feelings are dismissed, if saying, "I'm probably overreacting," has become a habit, know that you are not alone. Some stories are lived quietly because everything looks normal from the outside. But not everything that looks normal is healthy. Sometimes, the bravest thing isn't staying, it's leaving for yourself. Healing doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it starts with stopping, with letting go of proving, with taking yourself seriously again. If you found a part of yourself in this story, know that you are strong too. Awareness is where change begins. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I will continue sharing real-life stories like this. I'd love to know where you're listening from, feel free to write it in the comments. And if you want, you can share your own story too. Remember, you don't have to endure in silence. Choosing yourself is not selfish.